In every life, there are parts of ourselves we keep hidden from the world, secrets we carry not because we want to deceive, but because we are afraid of being judged, afraid of being seen as failures, afraid that the truth will change how people see us. But sometimes the universe has a way of bringing our hidden truths into the light at exactly the moment when we need it most, when keeping secrets has become more painful than revealing them, and when the support we have been too proud to ask for is finally within reach. This is the story of how one man's carefully constructed facade crumbled on national television, and how that moment of vulnerability became the beginning of the most transformative chapter of his life. Before we dive into this powerful story that will change how you think about success, struggle, and the courage it takes to ask for help, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Because what you are about to witness is a reminder that sometimes our greatest strength is admitting we cannot do everything alone. The Williams family from Charlotte, North Carolina walked onto the Family Feud stage in October 2024 with the kind of energy that made everyone in the studio smile. Leading the family was 45-year-old David Williams, dressed impeccably in a sharp navy blue suit with a crisp white shirt and a burgundy tie that looked expensive and carefully chosen. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, his hair was freshly cut and styled, and his smile was confident and warm. Standing beside him was his elderly mother, 72-year-old Dorothy Williams, a retired school teacher with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor who clearly adored her son. David's younger sister Maya, a 38-year-old nurse, stood with her husband Carlos, and rounding out the family was David's 19-year-old nephew Jordan, a college freshman full of youthful enthusiasm. To anyone watching, David appeared to be exactly what he claimed to be on his application: a successful corporate consultant who traveled frequently for work, drove a nice car, and lived the kind of life that made his family proud. What no one knew, not his mother, not his sister, not even his nephew who looked up to him as a role model, was that David Williams had been living in his car for the past 8 months. The suit he wore was one of 3 he rotated carefully, dry cleaning them at a discount place and hanging them in his vehicle on hangers hooked to the grab handles. He showered at a 24-hour gym where he maintained a membership because it cost less than renting an apartment and gave him a place to stay clean and presentable. His polished shoes had been resoled twice because he could not afford new ones. The confident smile he wore was a mask he had perfected over months of pretending everything was fine while his world fell apart around him. David had lost his consulting job 14 months earlier when his company downsized, eliminating his entire department in a single brutal meeting. He had savings at first, enough to keep paying rent and maintaining appearances while he searched for new work. But the job market was tougher than he expected, especially for someone in his 40s competing against younger candidates willing to work for less money. His savings ran out after 6 months, and rather than tell his family he was struggling, rather than ask his elderly mother for help or admit to his sister that he was not the success story they believed him to be, David made a choice that seemed logical at the time, but that had slowly been destroying him from the inside. He let his apartment go, moved his few remaining possessions into a storage unit he could barely afford, and started living out of his car. He told his family he was traveling more for work, that he was staying in hotels in different cities, that his busy schedule made it hard to visit as often. They believed him because they had no reason not to, because David had always been the responsible one, the successful one, the one who had everything figured out. He would show up for family dinners once or twice a month, always well-dressed, always with stories about his latest consulting project, always insisting on bringing expensive wine or dessert even though it meant he would skip meals for the next few days to afford it. His mother would beam with pride when she talked about him to her church friends, her son the successful consultant who was doing so well in the world. The Family Feud appearance had come about through his sister Maya, who had applied for the family to be on the show as a surprise for their mother's upcoming birthday. When they were selected, David's first instinct was to make an excuse, to say he could not get away from work, to avoid the risk of his carefully maintained facade cracking under the pressure and scrutiny. But his mother had been so excited, so happy at the prospect of being on television with her children and grandson, that David could not bring himself to disappoint her. So he said yes, borrowed money from a payday loan place to buy the suit he was wearing, and showed up at the studio determined to play his role perfectly one more time. The game started well for the Williams family. Dorothy was charming and sweet, getting answers correct and making Harvey laugh with her innocent misunderstandings of some of the more modern questions. Maya and Carlos worked well as a team, and Jordan brought youthful energy that balanced out the family dynamic. David played his part perfectly, giving solid answers, encouraging his family members, high-fiving and celebrating each small victory. Steve Harvey, always attentive to family dynamics, noticed how Dorothy kept looking at David with such obvious pride, how she would pat his arm and tell Steve between questions about her successful son who was doing so well in his career. Everything was going smoothly until the final round before Fast Money, when Steve asked a question that would change everything. The question was, name something you might do in your car besides drive. It seemed like a simple question, the kind with obvious answers like eat, sleep, talk on the phone, or listen to music. David was at the podium and he buzzed in quickly, his mind racing through potential answers. But something happened in that moment, something that David had not anticipated. After months of living in his car, of transforming his vehicle from simple transportation into his entire world, the answer that came to his mind was not one of the common, light-hearted responses the game was looking for. Instead, he found himself thinking about all the things he actually did in his car now, things that had nothing to do with driving and everything to do with survival. He thought about the careful system he had developed for organizing his belongings, about the blackout curtains he had installed on the windows so he could change clothes in privacy, about the small camping stove he used to heat water for instant coffee in the mornings, about the battery-operated fan he ran on hot nights when sleeping in the vehicle became almost unbearable. The words came out before he could stop them, before his usual careful filter could catch them and replace them with something safe and ordinary. "Live in it," he said, his voice quiet but clear. The studio fell silent for a moment, that particular kind of silence that happens when something unexpected and slightly uncomfortable has been said, and no one is quite sure how to respond. Steve Harvey's eyebrows went up in that trademark expression of surprise, and he looked at David with sudden interest. "Live in it," Steve repeated, his tone making it both a question and an acknowledgement. The board revealed that, yes, it was the number 6 answer with 8 points, because apparently enough people in the survey had given that response, perhaps thinking about college students or people traveling cross-country. But Steve's attention was not on the points anymore. He was looking at David with the intensity of someone who had just seen past a carefully constructed mask, and he was seeing something there that made him pause the game. "David," Steve said carefully, his voice gentle but probing, "was that answer based on personal experience?" The question hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. David could feel his mother's eyes on him, could sense his sister's sudden attention, could feel the weight of the cameras and the audience and the moment pressing down on him. He had a choice in that split second. He could laugh it off, could make a joke about a camping trip or a road trip adventure, could deflect and redirect and keep his secret safe. Or he could tell the truth, could let the walls he had been building for 8 months finally come down, could trust that maybe, just maybe, honesty would be better than the exhausting weight of pretending. His hands started shaking. His carefully maintained composure began to crack. And then, to his absolute horror, tears started forming in his eyes. He tried to blink them away, tried to maintain control, but months of stress and fear and loneliness and shame came flooding out all at once. "I am sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I am so sorry." Steve immediately walked over to him, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder, his expression shifting from curiosity to deep concern. "Talk to me, son," Steve said quietly. "What is going on?" David looked at his mother, who had risen from her seat with a worried expression, her hand over her heart. He looked at Maya, who was watching him with growing alarm. He looked at the audience, at the cameras, at all these strangers who were about to witness the complete dismantling of everything he had worked so hard to project. And then he made the hardest decision of his life. He chose truth over pride. "Mom," he said, turning to Dorothy, his voice shaking but growing stronger, "I have not been honest with you. I have not been honest with any of you. I lost my job 14 months ago, and I have been living in my car for the past 8 months. I am not a successful consultant traveling for work. I am homeless." The gasps from his family members were audible even over the shocked murmurs of the audience. Dorothy's hand went to her mouth, tears immediately springing to her eyes. Maya looked stunned, torn between disbelief and heartbreak. Carlos put his arm around her, and Jordan stood frozen, his young face struggling to process what he had just heard. Steve Harvey, in all his years of hosting Family Feud, had seen many emotional moments, but there was something about David's raw vulnerability, about the weight of shame and relief warring on his face, that made this feel different. He held up his hand to the crew, signaling them to keep taping, to let this moment unfold, because his instincts told him that something important was happening, something that needed to be witnessed and honored. "David," Steve said, his voice carrying both compassion and a gentle firmness, "I want you to look at me for a second. You just did one of the bravest things I have ever seen anyone do. You told the truth when you could have kept lying, when you could have protected your pride, when you could have kept that secret buried. Do you understand how much courage that took?" David shook his head, tears streaming down his face now without any attempt to hide them. "It is not courage," he said. "It is failure. I failed. I could not keep my job, I could not find new work, I could not even afford a place to live. I let my mother down, I let my whole family down, and I have been too ashamed to ask for help because I was supposed to be the successful one, the one who had it all figured out." Before Steve could respond, Dorothy Williams moved faster than anyone expected a 72-year-old woman to move. She crossed the stage and pulled her son into a fierce hug, her small frame somehow encompassing his larger one, and she held him while he sobbed into her shoulder the way he probably had not done since he was a child. When she finally pulled back, her face was wet with tears, but her voice was strong and clear. "David Anthony Williams," she said, using his full name the way mothers do when they need their children to really hear them, "you listen to me right now. You have not failed me. You could never fail me. Do you know what failure would have been? Failure would have been if you had turned to drugs or crime or violence to solve your problems. Failure would have been if you had given up on yourself completely, if you had stopped trying to find work, if you had lost your dignity and self-respect. But you did not do any of those things. You kept yourself clean and presentable, you kept looking for work, you kept showing up for this family even when you were struggling, and that is not failure, that is strength. But baby," she continued, her voice breaking, "what breaks my heart is that you thought you had to hide this from me, that you thought I would love you less or be disappointed in you because you hit a hard time. I raised you better than that. I raised you to know that family is supposed to be there for each other in the hard times, not just the good times." Maya had joined them now, wrapping her arms around both her mother and brother. "Why did you not tell me?" she asked, her voice full of pain. "David, I am a nurse, Carlos is a teacher, we have a spare room in our house. You could have stayed with us. We could have helped you." David pulled back, looking at both of them. "Because I was supposed to be the one helping you," he said. "I am the older brother, the successful one. You all looked up to me, and I could not stand the thought of you seeing me as a failure, of Mom worrying about me when she should be enjoying her retirement, of you feeling like you had to take care of me when I should be the one taking care of you." Steve stepped in, his voice gentle but firm. "David, I need you to hear something, and I need everyone watching this to hear it too. What you are describing, this belief that asking for help is weakness, that struggling means you are a failure, that you have to have everything figured out all the time or you are letting people down, that is not strength. That is pride, and pride will destroy you faster than any job loss or financial struggle ever could." He turned to address the camera, speaking not just to the studio audience but to the millions who would eventually see this. "We live in a society that tells us, especially men, that we have to be strong all the time, that we cannot ask for help, that admitting we are struggling is shameful. And so we have people living in their cars while wearing suits to maintain appearances. We have people suffering in silence because they are too proud to reach out. We have people choosing isolation and struggle over the support and love that their families and communities want to give them." Steve looked back at David. "Son, the people who love you do not love you because you are successful. They love you because you are you. And when you hide your struggles from them, when you pretend everything is fine, you are not protecting them from worry. You are robbing them of the opportunity to show you love in the way love is supposed to be shown, through support and presence during the hard times." Dorothy nodded vigorously. "He is exactly right," she said. "David, do you remember when your father died 12 years ago and I went through that terrible depression? You and Maya were there every single day, helping me, supporting me, making sure I was okay. Did you think less of me because I needed help? Did you love me less because I was struggling?" "Of course not," David said immediately. "You had just lost the love of your life. You needed support." "Exactly," Dorothy said. "And you have lost your job and your home and your sense of security. You need support. Why is it okay for me to need help but not okay for you?" The question hung in the air, and David had no answer because he knew she was right. Steve seized on this moment to dig deeper. "David, tell us what the last 8 months have actually been like," Steve said. "Not the version you have been telling your family, but the truth. What does a day in your life look like?" David took a deep breath, and what came out was a story that shocked everyone listening. "I wake up around 5:30 in the morning, usually in a parking lot, sometimes behind a shopping center, sometimes at a rest stop, wherever I think I will not be bothered," he began. "I drive to the gym, use their showers and bathrooms to get ready for the day. I have a routine where I can go from sleeping in my car to looking presentable in about 45 minutes. Then I go to a coffee shop with free Wi-Fi, and I spend the day applying for jobs, networking on LinkedIn, reaching out to old contacts, anything I can do to try to find work. I have applied to over 300 positions in the last 14 months. I have had 26 interviews. No offers. Around lunchtime, I usually go to the library because it is free and air-conditioned, and they do not mind if you stay all day. I keep applying for jobs. Sometimes I help other people with their resumes or job search because I have got pretty good at it. In the evening, I might go to a fast food place and buy something small so I can use their bathroom and Wi-Fi for a few more hours. Then I find a place to park for the night and try to sleep. The audience was completely silent, many people crying as they listened to this detailed account of survival and resilience. Maya was openly sobbing now, and even Carlos had tears in his eyes. Jordan looked like his entire understanding of the world had just been shattered. But what about food? Maya asked. How do you eat? David looked embarrassed. I have gotten really good at making a little bit go a long way, he said. There is a food bank I go to once a week where they do not ask too many questions. Sometimes I pick up day labor jobs, loading trucks or doing warehouse work, and that gives me enough money for food for a few days. I keep a cooler in my car with ice from gas stations. I have learned which restaurants have the best free bread or chips and salsa. You learn to adapt. And hygiene? Dorothy asked, her voice barely a whisper. How do you stay so clean and well-groomed? The gym membership is my lifeline, David explained. It costs me $30 a month, but it gives me access to showers, bathrooms, and a place to exercise, which helps with the stress and depression. I do my laundry at a laundromat every week, usually late at night when it is cheap. I keep my suits and dress clothes on hangers in the car so they do not wrinkle too much. I learned how to iron using the hot water from the gym shower and a flat surface. Steve shook his head in amazement. You have been living like this for 8 months while maintaining the appearance of a successful businessman, while showing up for family dinners, while keeping up this entire facade. The amount of energy that must have taken, the stress of it, I cannot even imagine. Why not just tell them the truth months ago? Because I kept thinking it would be temporary, David said. I kept thinking that the next interview would be the one, that the next job application would come through, that I would get back on my feet before anyone had to know. I thought I could fix it myself without burdening anyone. But temporary turned into months, and the longer I kept the secret, the harder it became to tell the truth. And honestly, there was a part of me that was just so ashamed. I have a college degree, I had a good job, I did everything right, and I still ended up homeless. What does that say about me? Steve's response was immediate and powerful. It says you are a human being living in a challenging economy where good people lose jobs through no fault of their own, and where the safety net is not always there to catch them when they fall. It says you are a survivor who figured out how to maintain your dignity and keep searching for work even in impossible circumstances. It says you are someone who values family so much that you would rather suffer alone than let them see you struggling. But David, and this is important, it also says you need to redefine what strength looks like. Steve turned to the audience again, his voice taking on the tone of a teacher sharing crucial wisdom. Real strength is not pretending you are fine when you are falling apart, he said. Real strength is admitting you need help and having the courage to ask for it. Real strength is being vulnerable with the people who love you and trusting that their love is not conditional on your success. Real strength is knowing that your worth as a human being is not tied to your job title or your bank account or where you sleep at night. He looked back at David and his family. So here is what is going to happen next, Steve said. First, David, you are going to go home with your sister and her husband tonight, and you are going to stay in their spare room until we figure out a more permanent solution. You are not going to argue about it. You are not going to feel like a burden. You are going to accept their help with grace and gratitude. Is that clear? David nodded, unable to speak through his tears. Second, Steve continued, I have some connections in the Charlotte area, and I am going to personally make some calls to people I know who might be hiring. I cannot promise you a job, but I can promise you some real opportunities and some people who will look at your resume seriously. Third, and this is for everyone watching, I want to talk about the resources available for people experiencing homelessness or job loss, because David's story is not unique. Steve proceeded to share information about job placement services, housing assistance programs, food banks, and mental health resources, speaking directly to the camera with the authority of someone who understood that this moment could help thousands of people beyond just the Williams family. He talked about the shame that keeps people from accessing these resources and why that shame is misplaced. He talked about the importance of community support and checking in on people even when they seem fine. He talked about how to ask for help and how to offer help without making people feel diminished. Then he turned back to David with one more question. David, what do you want to say to other people out there who might be going through something similar, who might be hiding their struggles because they are too proud or too ashamed to ask for help? David wiped his eyes and stood up straighter, finding strength in his vulnerability. I would say that hiding your struggle does not make it go away, he said. It just makes it harder and lonelier. I would say that the people who really love you want to help you, and when you do not let them, you are hurting them as much as you are hurting yourself. I would say that losing your job or your home does not make you a failure, it makes you human. And I would say that asking for help is not weakness, it is wisdom. The audience erupted in applause, standing to show their support for David and his family. Steve hugged David, then hugged Dorothy, Maya, Carlos, and Jordan, bringing the whole family together in a moment of unity and healing. Before we find out what happened next, Steve said to the cameras, "I need you all to do something for me." If this story touched you, if it made you think about someone in your life who might be struggling in silence, I need you to hit that subscribe button and share this video. Because the more people who see David's courage, the more lives we can potentially save from the isolation of hidden struggle. And if you are someone who is struggling right now, who is hiding your truth because you are ashamed or afraid, please hear me when I say that you are not alone, and that help is available if you are willing to reach out for it. The taping ended, but the story was far from over. In the days following the episode, before it even aired, Steve Harvey made good on his promise. He called contacts in Charlotte, including the CEO of a consulting firm who happened to be a friend and a fan of the show. He explained David's situation, vouched for his character based on what he had witnessed, and asked if they would be willing to interview him. 3 days later, David Williams sat in the office of Henderson Consulting Group, being interviewed for a position as a senior consultant. The interviewer, the CEO himself, started the conversation in an unexpected way. "Mr. Williams, Steve Harvey called me personally about you, and then he sent me the footage from your Family Feud appearance. I have watched it 3 times now, and I want you to know something before we even start this interview. The fact that you maintained your professionalism, kept yourself presentable, and continued searching for work for 14 months while living in your car tells me more about your character and work ethic than any resume ever could. We would be lucky to have someone with your resilience on our team." David was offered the job that day, with a salary that was actually higher than what he had been making at his previous position. When he called Maya to tell her, he broke down crying again, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. The Family Feud episode aired 3 weeks later, and the response was overwhelming. The show's social media was flooded with messages from people sharing their own stories of hidden struggle, thanking David for his courage, and asking how they could help. Several organizations that work with homeless populations reported a significant increase in both volunteers and donations in the weeks following the episode. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from David's mother. She organized a community meeting at her church where she invited David to speak about his experience and to help educate people about the realities of homelessness and unemployment. David, who had been so ashamed of his situation just weeks before, found himself standing in front of a room full of people, sharing his story not as a source of shame, but as a source of education and inspiration. He talked about the importance of checking in on loved ones, about recognizing the signs that someone might be struggling, about creating communities where people feel safe asking for help. The church started a program based on David's suggestions, a support group for people facing job loss or housing insecurity, where they could find resources, emotional support, and practical help without judgment. 6 months later, Steve Harvey invited the Williams family back to Family Feud for a follow-up segment. The difference in David was remarkable. He looked healthy and rested, the stress lines around his eyes had softened, and his smile was genuine rather than forced. He had been working at Henderson Consulting for 5 months and was already being considered for a promotion. He had saved enough money to get his own apartment, though he still had dinner with his family every Sunday. But the most significant change was not in his external circumstances, but in his internal state. "I learned that my worth is not tied to my job or my success," he told Steve and the audience. "I learned that vulnerability is not weakness, but actually the foundation of real connection. I learned that the love of family and community is not something you earn through achievement, but something you receive simply by being human and being willing to be known." Maya spoke about how the experience had changed their family dynamic. "We were always close," she said, "but there was this unspoken expectation that David had to be the strong one, the successful one, the one with all the answers. Now we have a more honest relationship where we can all admit when we are struggling, where we can all ask for help, where we can all be imperfect together. And honestly, it has made us closer than we ever were before. Dorothy shared her perspective as well. As a mother, the hardest part was knowing my son was suffering, and I did not know about it, she said. But I have learned that sometimes our children need to go through their own journeys to learn the lessons they need to learn. David learned that asking for help is not a sign of weakness, and I learned that I need to create a family culture where my children feel safe bringing me their problems, no matter how old they are or how successful they seem. Steve asked David what advice he would give to his younger self, knowing what he knows now. I would tell myself that success and failure are not permanent states but temporary circumstances, David said thoughtfully. I would tell myself that the people who love you will love you through the hard times if you give them the chance. I would tell myself that there is no shame in falling down, only in refusing to get back up, or in refusing to accept the hand that is reaching down to help you up. And I would tell myself that sometimes the worst moments of your life can become the most transformative if you are willing to be honest about them and to learn from them. The segment concluded with Steve sharing an update on the community impact of David's story. He revealed that over 50 people had reached out to the show saying that David's courage to share his truth had inspired them to seek help for their own hidden struggles, whether that was homelessness, addiction, mental health issues, or other challenges they had been facing alone. Several had reported that asking for help had literally saved their lives. Steve also announced that he had partnered with several organizations to create a resource guide for people experiencing job loss or housing insecurity, available free on the Family Feud website and at community centers across the country. As the segment ended, Steve looked directly into the camera and delivered a message that would be shared thousands of times on social media in the following weeks. If you are watching this and you are struggling with something you have been hiding, whether it is job loss, financial problems, health issues, addiction, or anything else that you have been too ashamed or too proud to share, I want you to know that you are not alone, he said. There are people who love you and want to help you, but they cannot help you if they do not know what you are going through. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of wisdom. It is a sign that you understand that we are not meant to face life's challenges alone, that we are stronger together than we are apart, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit that you cannot do it all by yourself. He paused, letting his words sink in. David Williams came on this show planning to maintain a facade, planning to keep pretending everything was fine, and instead he had the courage to tell the truth. That moment of honesty changed his life, changed his family's dynamics, and has helped countless other people who saw themselves in his story. Your moment of honesty could do the same for you. Do not wait until you hit rock bottom. Do not wait until you have exhausted every other option. Reach out now, ask for help now, and trust that the people who matter will show up for you. Before we close, I need you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because stories like David's remind us what truly matters in life. Not the image we project, but the truth we live. Not the success we achieve, but the connections we build. Not the pride we protect, but the vulnerability we share. David Williams today serves as a volunteer mentor for people transitioning out of homelessness, helping them navigate job searches and rebuild their lives. He speaks regularly at churches, community centers, and even corporate events about resilience, the importance of asking for help, and redefining success. His mother, Dorothy, has become an advocate for affordable housing in her community, working with local organizations to ensure that people experiencing hard times have access to safe places to stay. Maya and Carlos have opened their home to several people over the past year who needed temporary housing while getting back on their feet, creating a model of community support that is spreading to other families in their neighborhood. The Williams family story teaches us that our lowest moments can become our most powerful testimonies if we have the courage to share them honestly. It teaches us that the masks we wear to protect ourselves from judgment often end up isolating us from the very support we need most. It teaches us that true strength is found not in independence, but in interdependence, not in having all the answers, but in being willing to admit when we need help, not in projecting perfection, but in embracing our humanity with all its flaws and struggles and beautiful complexity. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Comment below if you have ever struggled with asking for help or if you have learned valuable lessons from difficult times. And remember that whatever you are facing today, you do not have to face it alone. There is wisdom in reaching out. There is strength in being vulnerable. And there is hope in the truth that the people who truly love you will love you not despite your struggles, but through them, walking alongside you until you find your way back to solid ground.